good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Good Growth for Cities live discussion on some of the key topics we wanted to address. I'm Carl Sizer, Management Board Member at PwC and Head of our Regional Business. And actually, we're really just looking forward to discussing this Good Growth for Cities Index, which is launching today. Amazingly, this is actually the 11th year that we have been measuring the performance and characteristics of the UK's largest 50 cities. And we look at a number of different public priorities: work-life balance, income, housing, safety, high streets. And it's important in our mind to recognise not just your traditional measures of economic success, but actually those around prosperity, opportunities, and the well-being of the general public. So with that as a brief intro, let me introduce my guests for today. We have Caroline Green, who is the CEO of Oxford City Council. Oxford actually, as you will see, is the top performing city in the index for a second year. A really strong performance and a real focus on some of the key economic measures such as income, employment rates, life expectancy, and those have really helped it to maintain its first place. We also have Professor Zahir Irani, Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bradford. And whilst Bradford is at the bottom of the ranking, one of the really interesting things that we've seen coming through in this year's report is that it is increasing its score more significantly than cities like Oxford on some really quite important things such as skills and income distribution. And that's where it is now performing above some of the national averages. And I'm very pleased to also be joined by Rachel Taylor, the leader of our government and health industries at PwC. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining.
Hi.
Now, some of you will have seen, although we didn't manage to get LinkedIn running quite this morning, we did run a quick poll in LinkedIn ahead of us going live. And the question we asked was, which championship playoff semi-finalists finished highest in this year's Good Growth for Cities Index? So let me just quickly ask the panel, what would you have all answered to this? And maybe Professor Irani, I could start with you.
Well, I have to confess I'm not a great football fan, and Rachel and I pretty much flipped a coin yesterday. I'm with Luton, but it could have been many other choices.
Excellent. Well, Rachel, given you flipped the coin, where did you go?
I went Sunderland.
Okay. And Caroline?
I have to confess I didn't have a clue either. I just knew that it was a particular list that Oxford wasn't at the top of. But I actually phoned a friend, so I know the answer. And I'd be very fearful if somebody sent me there.
Well, so the correct answer is Coventry. So well done to anyone that got that correct. And I think you're right, Caroline. Unfortunately, Oxford didn't feature in those final places, and I suspect they may have a way to go before they do. So look, let's get kicked off then around the discussion for today. And as I sort of highlighted earlier around the discussion on Bradford, in this year's index, we're seeing the gap between the highest and lowest ranked UK cities in the index narrowing. And that's really as the economic well-being of the cities at the bottom of that index have improved at a much faster rate than those at the top. So Rachel, maybe kicking off with you, what's the reason we're seeing some of those changes?
Thanks, Carl. As you say, it's really the top cities are improving at a slower rate than the bottom ones. And I guess just to bring that to life, cities like Bradford are catching up because it's increased its scores significantly around skills, income distribution, and as you say, above the national average. And I guess we're particularly delighted about that in Bradford. We're a local employer in the area, and we're really investing in skills and talent and thinking about how we can grow opportunities alongside the universities and other businesses and indeed the local authority. I guess the other thing that's driving that change are people's changing priorities. As Carl said, we look at a huge range of measures around what good growth is. And actually from a public perspective, we saw an increased focus on financial well-being. And we've got a number of measures in the index that look at financial well-being, so income, jobs, income distribution. And actually, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that given the pressures people are feeling as a result of the cost of living crisis. Interestingly, one of the other areas of big increase for people's priorities is from work-life balance. And we're seeing a continued trend post-pandemic for working patterns to change how we live and work. And actually that shift is helping drive growth in some of those previously lower performing UK cities.
Really helpful intro, Rachel. I think, actually really great to hear how some of those lower performing cities have been. And so here, maybe I could bring you in here. What's your reflections on Bradford's performance and how it's driving those improvements?
Well, I think Bradford's quite a unique city. We're an exciting young, I use the word young in the sense that we have a very large population of young talent. We're a very diverse city, and absolutely over the moon, having won actually Bradford 2025. So that's something that everybody's uniting and supporting. We've got significant investment in Bradford Live, which is a 4,000 seat indoor music venue managed by the NEC. Significant investment in our Darley Street complex, and you'll start seeing, and have indeed seen, new buildings being erected in the city centre. So I think when you add some of the exciting activities taking place in Bradford, as well as the fantastic heritage that we have, UNESCO City of Film and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, all of these factors I think really do complement the history as well as the forward-thinking projection that the city leaders have in really trying to support and unite towards an investment that brings together future successes and hopefully prosperity, investing in young talent, and the index has clearly identified skills as something that the city is benefiting from. And again, that's something that university and local colleges are supporting. And the whole uniting around place, I think that's something that the city is really, really focusing on, as well as entrepreneurship. And I use entrepreneurship as really one of the significant things that I think does distinguish Bradford from other regions. Back in 2020, startupgeek.com placed Bradford 26th nationally, beating London. In 2021, the Hitachi Capital Survey ranked Bradford as actually having the largest number of graduates in the north that start their own business. And again, that's something we're very proud of at the university. In 2021, Instant Office placed Bradford second out of 21 entrepreneurial cities. So there's lots of really exciting activities, and we've got a workforce that I think is both committed to skills development, committed to supporting local industry, but actually interested in developing their own businesses. And I think that's something that we will continue to support, and particularly wanting to see some of the benefits of the Prosperity Fund via Levelling Up really filtering down into the city, as well as hopefully investment zones and some of the benefits that that will bring. I think one of the key things that, having been the chair of the Economic Recovery Board during COVID for the city, one of the key things that I identified as a standout feature is that strong connection between health and a growing economy. And I really do think we've got to continue to support health in all its forms, both in terms of our kind of early development stages, right through to some of our older population, and really trying to give them an opportunity to re-enter the workplace.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Zahir. And actually, I've spent a fair bit of time in Bradford actually over recent months, and I had the pleasure of going around some of the city buildings, and the history in those buildings is really quite phenomenal. And actually, I think how you articulated really wanting to get Bradford on a map, talk about all of its great attributes, is the sort of things that are really helping to bring Bradford to life. And that's certainly part of why we're very much investing in that city, and have done now for a few years. Caroline, maybe I could come on to you and just think more about the cities at the top of the index. And of course, brilliant that Oxford are there for the second year, but what do you think Oxford needs to do to keep pace with those improvements?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I mean, I think it's a really good question, because obviously it's great to hear places like Bradford making progress, but we want the disparity in that gap to close because of improvement everywhere, not levelling down of some places. And so continued success of places like Oxford can support that levelling up because of the contribution that we make to the UK PLC, but also because of the spin-out benefits from our economy to others across the country. We also have our own levelling up challenge in Oxford, in that our success is also accompanied by quite stark and ingrained inequalities. So we need to do a number of things. Firstly, picking up on what Zahir said, it's about place leadership and developing the right vision and strategies with local stakeholders, so that we can articulate and champion our strengths but also deal with the challenges and make the trade-offs between some of the competing demands on space in places like Oxford. So that's about having really clear economic strategies and planning policies that people can engage with and understand. The second area is about we need to tackle the constraints that are constraining productivity and threatening the potential of the area. And for us, that's dealing with transport congestion, which is pretty severe in Oxford, affordable housing. We have a very high housing and affordability problem, but also creating good quality spaces, which are so important to the attractiveness of our area, but also people's well-being. And I think your index is highlighting that that's increasing in importance. And then just to link back to what Zahir said, I think it's also about creating those healthy places. So everything we need to do needs to bear in mind the environmental challenge, but also creating healthy neighbourhoods. In addition to that, then we need to ensure that the growth really delivers benefits locally, creating opportunities for local people in terms of jobs, skills, pathways to career development. And that's important for us, not only because it's needed to deal with some of the skill shortages which are holding back parts of the economy, but also by employing locally, we are reducing the burdens on affordable housing and the need to travel. And it also, I think, builds support within communities for development and growth if people see that this is directly having a benefit to them. And then I think the last area I wanted to mention in terms of what we need to do is really maximising the use of our convening power and ability to build relationships across partnerships in order to drive innovation, but also connect opportunities and build the collective capacity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Caroline. Actually, the point you make there about how within a city, we shouldn't just look at it all as one level. There is disparity and difference within a city. And it's, again, as I've gone around the country, it's quite clear. You can see it may well be a thriving city, but there are areas of deprivation. And levelling up, in my mind, is not just about city to city, but it's within a city as well, and making sure we've got that equality and rising overall social wellness. Maybe just carrying on, Caroline, as a leader of a city, how do you seek to strive to create that city for everyone, to try and reduce down some of those challenges around housing, around inequalities, around social mobility that can sometimes be a problem, especially places like London as well? That those all have some challenges in different areas. How do you see that as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really, really live issue. I think there can be a perception that, in places with strong economic growth, that is negatively impacting on existing communities. But it's really clear that growth is happening in places like Oxford anyway, largely as a result of, our very vibrant an internationally renowned kind of knowledge and science-based economy. So we need to plan for it. But it is also about championing that need for economic growth, understanding and promoting what we're good at and our unique assets and opportunities. So we need to be planning for and creating the places that bring those jobs, but balancing that with the need for homes and creating good quality spaces. So a really exciting example we've got in Oxford at the moment is in the West End of the city, which is currently kind of quite shabby, but there's a real transformational opportunity for a new innovation district, which will bring new employment space, hotels, homes. But it also has a real opportunity to bring with it advantages to the city, so better transport links, more active travel, new public spaces which will open up these areas to the wider public and amenities, along the river, etc. But also to work through the development industry on things like community employment plans, so that we're directly benefiting the local people. But it is also about tackling those inequalities and getting more benefit for communities and the environment. So we're doing that through supporting social enterprises and local businesses. We've got a project called Meanwhile in Oxfordshire, which is about bringing vacant properties back into use as affordable and flexible workspaces for social enterprises and local SMEs. We've got a number of premises that we're also investing in to bring forward as flexible, affordable workspace as permanent flexible workspace. We're doing things like council's investing £7 million in our historic covered market, which I'm sure you've probably seen if you've been to Oxford. It's looking a little bit tired, but it is the natural home for many independent businesses in Oxford. So we've got a big regeneration and redevelopment scheme. Then there's things like supporting young people into work through apprentices and our Kickstart placement scheme, which is about working with local employers to place young people on universal credit into job placements. And we need to work at really very local and neighbourhood level to support the opportunities. We have there's an initiative in Oxford called Owned by Oxford, which brings together grassroots community organisations and anchor institutions like the councils and the universities to create those opportunities for community wealth building. Really good example, recent example is a community interest company called Waste to Taste, which was set up in the pandemic to turn unused or unwanted food into healthy and tasty food options. We connected them with an extra care provider in the city, and that's now their new home where they're running a cafe, but also a catering business. A couple of other things to mention. We're campaigning, we've got a campaign across the city to pay the Oxford living wage, which is 90% of London living wage, reflecting the higher wage costs, and working with employers to maximise the social value from things like procurement. So that's really a strand about working locally to be a good employer. And then finally, for the City Council, it's directly as an employer and using our wholly owned companies which deliver services not just to the council but other institutions in the city. So it's a local employer, employs local people, but also make sure that the revenue and returns from that are reinvested to support the local economy.
Brilliant, some fabulous examples there, Caroline. Thank you. And I love the Waste to Taste example. That's
great.
Definitely got a ring to it. Zahir, maybe just coming back to you, we've talked about the progress that's been made by Bradford, but clearly there's still some challenges there and some significant disparities. What do you think are the key levers we need to pull to really try and speed up closing that regional equality gap?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, we've got some real social and economic inequalities and significant disparity right across the region. And actually what COVID has done is amplified those disparities and made them much more visible. But actually, in some respect, that's also positive because that visibility now has allowed us all to identify them, but actually then put interventions in play. And some of those disparities are quite pronounced, actually. So if you look, we've got 10% of our 18 to 24-year-old population being unemployed, set against a 5% national average, so clearly double the national average. 12% of our adults have no qualifications at all, against a 6.6% national average. 71% of adults have education up to MVQ level 2 against the 78% national average. And 36% of adults are educated up to MVQ level 4, which is degree level, against a 44% national average. So you can clearly see we've got a lot of work to be done. I think in terms of some of the key things that we're all driving towards is clearly wanting to bring greater levels of skill into the region and upskill. But actually, it's not just about the skills, it's employment. So we need skills and employment, and we need them in new and our growing sectors. And actually a stronger focus on those jobs and sectors for the future. So trying to gravitate all around the green economy, circular economy, zero carbon and clean energy. But actually what we're also doing at the university is trying to be disruptors in the sector as well. So we recently launched, and I use this as an example, given Carl, you talked about our fantastic architecture. So we actually launched an architecture program last year at the university, and we were very innovative in the way that we approached it. So rather than a traditional course that basically looks at a plot of land and tries to squeeze as many houses as you can into that plot, actually we turned it the other way around. We've got some of the worst housing stock in the region. What we wanted to do is be innovative in how we can take these kind of classic 2 up, 2 down that are pretty poor quality housing stock, just not designed really for modern day living, is to try and make them much more energy efficient and a better living space. So taking existing stock and actually trying to improve it. Also greater effort in trying to support business startups. I mentioned earlier around some of the great success that we've got in that area, but actually we need to do a lot more. But it's also about making sure we can attract talent into new sectors like deep tech, fintech, and making sure that we are that destination of choice, because it's very clear that more will attract more. We want more people to come to our region, and more people will attract more people. Bradford's a district. Sorry, I was just going to finally say Bradford's a very big district, and I think that strong connection between towns and the city centre needs an absolute new vision. And I think there's often this kind of fixation on the city centre, and actually we're so much more than a city centre. We've got some great green spaces, some great towns in our district, and it's about trying to have an engaged, interconnected infrastructure that brings them into the city, but actually allows the city to venture into some of our peripheral towns as well.
Couldn't agree more with that last point there about getting the towns coming into the city centre. I think also the piece, the way you talked about there, the strengths of the city, whether it be the architecture or whatever it might be, how you build on those strengths that the city has already got to amplify and accelerate the progress. I love those ideas. Rachel, just coming to you, I think we need to talk about the big D, devolution in this particular case. And certainly what we talk about a lot in our report is this need for more devolution and what we actually think is meant by effective devolution. And I think we've seen some really good examples of that over recent years. So what would this mean for the role of businesses and public-private partnership to deliver that change? Maybe you could share a few thoughts around that.
Yeah, of course, Carl. I guess Caroline and Zahir have done my work for me here, because I guess it's really clear from this conversation that actually local leaders really do know best what's for their local communities to make the difference, to drive economic growth and good economic growth. So I think there's a real sense of creating partnerships that you can only really do if you understand where the strengths are and actually where you can work with communities and business to deliver the things that Caroline and Zahir have talked about in terms of local investment, infrastructure, skills development, etc. I guess the other thing that we think is really important is the role of businesses. And I know both Caroline and Zahir's have talked about the role of the business plays in this. And I guess if I look at examples, Carl, for us, we're doing quite a lot of work in Manchester and Cardiff as examples in terms of thinking about creating both skills, but also, as Zahir said, employment opportunities, but that are really aligned to local growth, local sector strengths. So you start to create some real sense of kind of purpose and real economic clusters to drive growth and productivity. So for me, it's about strategic alignment between business and local leadership to really make devolution work.
Yeah, completely agree on that linkage of business, local government, academia, and actually all ploughing together along the same objectives, things to really make a focus on the city, I think really makes a difference. Maybe, Caroline, just very conscious of time, but a couple of just things maybe in terms of examples you've seen of public-private partnerships really making a difference in Oxford.
Yeah, I could take another half an hour talking about everything that's going on in that space. I'll try and just limit myself to a couple. I mentioned earlier the West End development, series of developments coming forward. I think that's a really good example of what a partnership can achieve, because we've got a partnership between the city council, the county council, university, and the landowners working together on a joint prospectus in order to realise the potential from that area of change. And that means that we're working to a shared vision rather than seeing incremental development. We can really make sure that that's planned together, but maximises therefore the benefits. But it also enabled us to make a really strong case for investment in rail. And if anyone's been to Oxford recently, you'll know that the station is midway through a major redevelopment. So that's really important in terms of encouraging modal shift. We're in a formal partnership, a JV with one of the Oxford colleges, bringing forward a phase of that development. And we've also worked with a number of the partners to co-fund the next stage of the feasibility and design stage into reopening one of the old Cowley branch line to passenger transport, which will unlock new development space, but also really key access to one of the more deprived areas of the city. So I think that's a really good example. I won't elaborate too much on others, but other ones we've got are the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership, had a charter launch in January with more than 100 businesses coming along to see how they can work together to be more inclusive employers. We've got the Zero Carbon Oxford Partnership, which has the 21 biggest employers in the city, and they're all working together on a roadmap and action plan to get to zero carbon. Related to that, I think one of the examples of what partnership working can achieve is around our energy super hub and Europe's largest Europe's most powerful EV charging station at Redbridge Park and Ride, which was delivered as a result of collaboration with Pivot Power and a consortium of kind of global EV companies. So really, really powerful. And then at the other end of the spectrum, it really is, as Zahir said, about working with the universities to tap into their a huge kind of capacity, capability and assets. And we've got projects where there's sort of outreach and volunteering with schools, but also inviting young people along to things like science bazaars, getting undergraduates to have work placements, doing the accounts for local charities, things like that. So huge range of partnership working, and I can't think of anything actually that we can achieve without partnership working.
I completely agree, Caroline, very helpful. And you referenced there Zahir's comment earlier on about skills. Maybe Zahir, just coming to you finally in terms of how cities can utilise the role of business to help drive the skills agenda. And any thoughts or perspectives around that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a very quick example. So about 4 years ago, I wrote to some of the big tech companies and basically said, look, we've got a vision to make Bradford a leading place for AI and data analytics. And people told me, you'll write to them, but no one will ever come, and no one will help you co-create that course that you want to develop. Well, actually, they all came, and they supported us in developing an outcome-based program that was looking at applied artificial intelligence and data science. We launched that program. It went straight into our #1 recruiter. 4 years later, the University of Bradford now has the largest postgraduate population in artificial intelligence and data analytics, according to the UK Higher Education Statistical Agency. So what I will say is that when you actually put your focused attention to something, when you engage with absolute partners that are committed and support your vision, and we've got an equality, diversity and inclusion underpinning in everything that we do, and actually when you're skills driven, and a lot of our courses now are micro-badged, so it's not just about leaving with an exit qualification that's a university degree, it's skills based and aligns to the needs of industry and those that are doing the recruitment, you can be successful. And that is evidenced with just one example of one course that's gone straight in, and 4 years later has meant that the University of Bradford is the place where people come from all over the world to study applied artificial intelligence and data analytics.
Fabulous examples there, and actually I love the bravery that you went with there, and even when people said maybe don't or they wouldn't come, still doing it and seeing what can happen. It's superb. So look, we are very much coming to the end. If I could just quickly get some final reflections from the panel in terms of one action maybe that we could take away to make a difference to levelling up in the UK, what would that be? And maybe Caroline, very briefly to you.
Sure. I feel a bit guilty because Rachel shared hers with me, which I wholeheartedly agree to. So I tried to come up with something different, but might be a little bit similar. But in terms of one thing, I think we should all be challenging ourselves as employers as to really how we can contribute to the places and communities in which we locate, because growing skills and talent locally and the type of innovation that Zahir was just articulating makes really good business sense, but it also really helps on a range of the indicators that PwC are looked into in terms of well-being, travel, housing, building a better environment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Caroline. Rachel, I'll come to you if I can now.
Yeah, so I think it is about, I guess, as you say, employers investing in skills and infrastructure, but not doing it alone, but doing it with others. And I think rather than trying to just solve your own talent problem, how do you actually build talent as a collective of organisations in our local community? I think it's really important.
Excellent. So that collaboration is key. And Zahir, to you.
Yeah, so I don't think we just want jobs. We want good quality jobs, and we want resilient businesses. And I think what COVID has demonstrated is that, you know, there will be all sorts of different shocks that we'll experience at different points in our life. And I think in making sure that we've got sustainable and resilient communities to support each other during those times of difficulty. So good quality jobs, resilient businesses that all are engaged with a sustainable and resilient community structure.
Brilliant. Well, I think if I try and bring a number of those together, for me, it's all about collaboration, working together. We can't do this in isolation. We have to have a strong narrative within a place that everyone can get in behind. And if everyone is pointing in the same direction, the speed of change, I think, can really come through, whether that's someone like Bradford currently at the bottom of the table that is fast moving ahead and really accelerating and getting that skills agenda and improvement in the overall well-being of the group in a better place, or Oxford, which needs to be and rightly should be right at the top, and we need to learn and benefit from that and make sure even within the city of Oxford we're getting all of that balance right. But that really means that place-based focus is so critical. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversation today. Apologies once again for the slight technical problems with LinkedIn earlier this morning, but hopefully some good, valuable insights from that. Please do download the Good Growth for Cities report, either from the LinkedIn page or from our website. Thank you very much to our panel. Fabulous conversation today. And thank you all for listening to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.